the silence in our kitchen shattered. Chloe stood by the island, face flushed red as she played her final card. She looked me in the eye, trembling with malice. My wife said, "I told my lawyer to take everything." "You don't deserve a single thing," I said. "Okay." Then my lawyer showed her lawyer the prenup and the hidden accounts and the secret credit cards. She got everything she deserved. Nothing. But right then, standing in the wreckage, she actually thought she had won. She started listing her demands with terrifying confidence. She wanted the house I bought before we met, my truck, half my retirement. She paced the room, heels clicking on the hardwood I had refinished myself. She talked about compensation for her wasted years, completely ignoring that I paid every bill while she played real estate agent. She interpreted my silence as weakness, thinking I was paralyzed by fear. In reality, I was just doing the math in my head, counting down the hours. Most men would be panicking right now. My father panicked during his second divorce, and he lost the cabin because of it. But I wasn't my father. I was a logistician. I spent my days moving shipping containers across oceans, predicting disasters before they happened. I had spent 5 years predicting this exact moment. I looked at the wedding photo still hanging on the wall, slightly crooked. The man in that photo was hopeful, but the man standing here was prepared. I felt nothing but cold resolve. "Are you even listening to me?" "Liam," she screamed, slamming her hand on the counter. The sound echoed, causing dust motes to dance in the afternoon sun. "I said I am taking the house. You are going to be living in a studio apartment when I am done." She wanted a fight. She wanted me to beg or throw something to validate her narrative that I was unstable. Instead, I picked up my coffee mug and rinsed it out slowly. The water ran clear and cool over my hands. I turned off the faucet and dried my hands. "I heard you, Chloe," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "If that is what you want, have your lawyer set up the meeting." Her eyes widened. She blinked, confused by the lack of resistance. She had rehearsed a battle, not a surrender. "Fine," she stammered, smoothing her skirt. "Thursday at 2. Don't be late." She grabbed her keys and stormed out, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the windows in their frames. Her leased BMW roared to life in the driveway and faded down the street. The house settled back into silence, the only sound the hum of the refrigerator. I didn't feel sad. I didn't feel heartbroken. I walked into the garage and opened the safe hidden behind the tool rack. Inside sat a thick manila envelope, cool to the touch. She thought she had broken me today. She had no idea she had just engaged the safety protocols I initiated 5 years ago. I didn't see the predator, I only saw the spark. We met at a friend's wedding. I was fixing a sound system. She was the life of the party. Chloe was electric, a burst of chaotic color in my world of spreadsheets. She made boring situations thrilling. I was 29 and lonely enough to mistake her volatility for passion. I ignored the first warning sign that night. She ordered the most expensive champagne on the menu, assuming someone else would pay. The cracks appeared 6 months in. They were subtle at first, like hairline fractures in a foundation. Chloe had a habit of treating conversation like a transaction. She constantly talked about her friends' relationships, but never about love or support. It was always about the loot. Brittany's boyfriend just surprised her with a trip to Miami. She would say, watching my reaction closely. "Must be nice to be appreciated like that." She dropped these hints like passive, aggressive breadcrumbs, leading directly to my wallet. Before buying the ring, I visited my father. Frank lived in a tidy bungalow smelling of sawdust. He had been divorced twice, losing a fortune each time. I sat at his kitchen table and told him I was going to propose. He didn't smile. He just poured 2 black coffees and looked at me with tired eyes. Son, if you marry this girl, protect yourself first, he said. Get a prenup. It isn't romantic, and she will scream, but do it. I wanted to argue. I wanted to tell him Chloe was different, that our love was stronger than legal contracts. But my father had a track record of being right about painful things. His advice gnawed at me for weeks. I bought the ring, a modest diamond I paid for in cash, and planned the proposal. She said yes immediately, crying tears. But looking back, I think she was crying with relief. She finally had a lock on a stable future. The temperature in my living room dropped 40 degrees. We were planning the seating chart when I slid the folder across the coffee table. I think we should sign a prenup, I said, keeping my voice steady. Just to keep things clean. Her smile vanished instantly. She looked at me like I had slapped her. A prenup? She asked, her voice trembling. That basically says you are planning for us to fail. You don't trust me at all, do you, Liam? The argument lasted 3 weeks. She weaponized her tears, calling her mother to explain how hurt she was. Her friends sent me nasty texts about being controlling. The entire emotional manipulation playbook was thrown at me. But when I make a decision based on logic, I don't fold. I stayed calm and made it clear the contract was non-negotiable. No paper, no wedding, I said. Eventually, she realized I wouldn't break. She signed it, but her eyes were cold. We walked down the aisle on a Saturday in June. Her parents paid for the reception, but everything seemed perfect. She smiled at the guests, radiant in white, clutching my hand tightly. I squeezed back, feeling a mix of love and grim satisfaction. I thought the prenup was just a formality we would never need. I didn't know I had just secured the only lifeboat on the Titanic. As we said our vows, the ink was already drying in the vault. The first year was a slow invasion. I came home one Tuesday to find my sanctuary violated. My garage workshop, usually a grid of organized electronics, became a dumping ground. Chloe had stacked boxes of seasonal decor against my workbench, blocking access to my soldering station. We need the closet space inside, she said, barely looking up from her phone. She didn't ask, she just annexed. My tools were shoved aside, an order replaced by her chaos. It was a boundary crossed, but it felt significant. The comparison game began in earnest. It wasn't enough to be happy, we had to be performatively happy. Chloe spent hours scrolling through Instagram, her face illuminated by the blue light of other people's curated lives. Kelly got a Louis Vuitton bag for her birthday. She noted over dinner, stabbing at her salad, and Josh took Amanda to New York. The subtext was a hammer. My thoughtful gifts, books she liked, jewelry within budget, were inadequate. I was competing against ghosts on a screen. I tried to steer the ship back to reality. I sat her down with a spreadsheet showing our income versus her spending. She looked at the numbers like they were foreign hieroglyphs. Why are you always so worried about money? She snapped. We both work. We're fine. I pointed to the credit card balance. We're fine because I plan. She rolled her eyes. No. We're boring because you are miserable. You hoard money like a dragon. That stung. Prudence was now a character flaw. The dragon comment lingered, but her spending didn't slow down. It shifted gears. Suddenly, the local YMCA wasn't good enough. She needed the luxury gym downtown with the eucalyptus towels. Drugstore moisturizer was replaced by $60 jars of investment cream. Packages started arriving daily, cardboard towers piling up by the door. "It's for work," she claimed, unwrapping a new blazer. "Professional appearance matters, Liam." She was an admin assistant at a dental office. The math didn't add up, but the bills certainly did. I stopped arguing about the budget. It was like shouting at a hurricane. Instead, I remembered my father's second piece of advice: keep exit money. I looked at our joint account, watching the balance fluctuate wildly with her whims. I realized I wasn't saving for a house upgrade or a vacation anymore. I was subsidizing a delusion. If I didn't secure my own oxygen mask, I would suffocate alongside her. That night, staring at a bank statement, the love didn't die, but the trust evaporated. I executed the plan with the same precision I used at work. I went to a different bank across town, one where we had no history. I opened a checking account and a high-yield savings account in my name only. I didn't tell her. I didn't feel guilty. I set up a direct deposit split at payroll. 20% of my check, plus all my quarterly bonuses, went straight into the lifeboat. Chloe never noticed the difference because she never checked the pay stubs. I ramped up my side business restoring radios. Every cash sale went into a lockbox in the garage, then into the secret account. It became a ritual. I would sell a restored Philco unit for $300 and feel a rush of safety, not profit. The money wasn't for buying things. It was distance. It was freedom. As Chloe bought designer shoes to impress strangers, I was buying my future autonomy, one deposit at a time. The divide was real. Year 3 hit us like a freight train of bad decisions. Chloe walked into the kitchen one evening, poured a glass of wine, and announced she had quit her job. She didn't discuss it, she just did it. "I am going into real estate," she declared, eyes shining with manic energy. "I can make 6 figures easily, Liam. We'll be set." When I asked how we would pay bills, she scoffed. "God, why are you so negative? Can't you just support my dreams?" The manipulation was effortless. She enrolled in a licensing course using our joint card. $2,000 vanished instantly. I watched her study habits, which consisted mostly of highlighting textbooks in neon colors for social media photos. "It's about the aesthetic," she told me when I pointed out she hadn't turned a page. She wasn't preparing for a career. She was role-playing a businesswoman. She didn't see the hard work required to sell a home. She only saw the commission checks she hadn't earned yet. The financial reality was suffocating. With her income gone, the mortgage, utilities, and groceries fell entirely on my shoulders. I picked up extra shifts, managing late-night logistics for international shipments. I came home exhausted, smelling of diesel and dust, only to find Chloe complaining about her networking brunches. She contributed nothing to the household, but acted like she was carrying the world. "You have no idea how hard it is to build a brand," she sighed. The networking was expensive. Suddenly, her wardrobe wasn't professional enough for luxury clients. She needed tailored suits, Italian shoes, and high-end makeup to look the part. The credit card bill arrived like a ransom note. Hair appointments, nail salons, and $70 lunches with people who weren't buying houses. "You have to spend money to make money," she lectured. She was burning through reserves at a terrifying rate. She was digging a hole, and she expected me to hand her a bigger shovel. I checked my credit score one night and felt my stomach drop. The utilization on our joint card was creeping into the danger zone. If she maxed it out or missed a payment, my history would be dragged down with hers. My ability to buy a car or refinance the house was at risk. I realized then that my secret savings account wasn't enough. Cash was good, but credit was credibility. I needed a firewall between her chaos and my name. I applied for 3 new credit cards the next morning from my office computer. I used my work address for correspondence so nothing would arrive at the house. When the plastic arrived, I activated them and locked them in my desk drawer. I used them for gas and lunch, paying the balance in full every month from my secret account. I was building a pristine, shadow credit history she couldn't touch. It felt deceptive, but survival often looks like betrayal from the outside. Chloe eventually passed her exam on the second try. We celebrated with a dinner I couldn't afford, where she toasted to her future empire. 3 months went by, then 6. She sold exactly 0 houses. Not one. She blamed the market, her broker, and the interest rates. She blamed everyone except herself. She was playing house with my money, convinced success was owed to her. She didn't know I was documenting every cent of her failure. The ledger was growing heavy. I found the bullet hole in our finances on a rainy Tuesday. I was reconciling the joint account statement when a number jumped out at me. $2,000 for a luxury mindset retreat in Sedona. It was charged 3 days ago. My chest tightened. We were barely scraping by on my salary, eating pasta 4 nights a week, and she had dropped $2,000 on a weekend of manifesting wealth. The sheer audacity of it left me breathless. It wasn't just spending, it was theft. I walked into the living room where Chloe was watching television. I held the printed statement like a weapon. "What is this?" I asked, keeping my voice low. She glanced at the paper and shrugged, not even pausing her show. "It's a seminar, Liam. Essential for networking." She said it casually, like buying a pack of gum. "We don't have $2,000 for seminars," I said. "You didn't ask me." She finally looked up, her expression hardening into annoyance. She stood up, crossing her arms defensively. "I knew you would say no," she snapped. "You always say no. Someone in this marriage has to have ambition." The accusation was laughable. I was working 60 hours a week to fund her ambition. "This isn't ambition, Chloe. It's debt. You haven't sold a single house in 6 months." Her face twisted. "That's because you don't support me? You want me to fail so you can keep me in that miserable admin job forever?" The argument spiraled, voices rising. I pointed out that I was the only one paying the mortgage. That's when she said it. "That's your job, Liam! You are the husband. You are supposed to provide so I can build something." It wasn't said with gratitude, it was said with contempt. She didn't see a partner standing there. She saw a utility bill that talked. She saw an obstacle to the lifestyle she felt entitled to. The realization hit me like ice water. Something inside me clicked off. It was the switch that controlled my desire to make this work. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw a stranger wearing my wife's face. All the overtime, the stress, the budgeting, it was fuel for a fire she didn't care about. I stopped shouting. My shoulders dropped. I wasn't angry anymore. I was done. The clarity was absolute. I wasn't going to save our marriage. I was going to save myself. "You know what?" she yelled, mistaking my silence for defeat. "I am done with your negativity. I am going to stay at Jessica's for a few days. Maybe then you'll appreciate what I bring to this house." She grabbed her keys, expecting me to beg her to stay. She wanted a chase. She wanted me to apologize for being upset about her spending. "Go ahead," I said quietly. "Take the time you need." She hesitated for a fraction of a second, surprised, then stormed out. She paused at the door, hand on the knob, needing the last word. "And when I decide to leave for good, Liam, I am taking everything." The house, the cars, all of it. You'll regret treating me like this. The door slammed, sealing the promise. She didn't know she had just played her hand way too early. I walked to the kitchen and picked up the phone. I didn't call her. I called the lawyer who drafted our prenup. It was time. Chloe returned to the house, only once to pack 3 suitcases and a box of wine. She didn't speak to me, treating the hallway like a demilitarized zone where eye contact was an act of aggression. She left her house key on the granite counter with a theatrical clatter, a final sound effect to mark her exit. 2 days later, the email arrived. It wasn't a personal note. It was a formal notification from Patricia H. Sterling, Esquire. The letterhead was thick, the font expensive. She hadn't wasted a second. I walked into Mr. Vance's office with a briefcase that felt heavier than lead. The room smelled of old paper and lemon polish, a stark contrast to the sleek glass firm Chloe had hired. Vance wasn't flashy. He wore a rumpled suit and looked like he'd rather be fishing, but his eyes were sharp as flint. He shook my hand with a grip that promised violence if necessary. "Let's see the damage," he said, clearing a space on his mahogany desk. I opened the latches. Click, click. I laid the documents out like tarot cards predicting her doom. First came the prenup, signed 5 years ago in blue ink. Vance scanned it, nodding slowly as he read the clauses regarding pre-marital assets. Next, I placed the deed to the house. Purchased by me solely 2 years before the wedding. Then the title to my truck. Clean, Vance muttered, tapping the paper. Standard but solid. She will argue duress on the prenup, but the timestamp on the notary seal kills that. He looked up. What else? This was the moment of truth. I pulled out the binders for the accounts she didn't know existed. Separate checking, I said. Separate high-yield savings. Funded exclusively by payroll deductions and side hustles. Vance raised an eyebrow. I showed him the transaction logs. Not a single transfer from joint funds. Not 1 cent of marital money touched these vaults. I kept them completely firewalled. I explained. Vance actually smiled, a rare, wintry thing. This is textbook, he whispered. Most men mess this part up. You didn't. I wasn't done. I produced the statements for the 3 credit cards in my name only. 0 balance. Perfect payment history. Then I slammed down the joint account statements. They were bleeding red ink. She maxed this out, I said, pointing to the total. And here is the kicker. I handed him the forensic audit I had spent 3 nights compiling. It was a color-coded spreadsheet of her spending. Pink for vanity, green for business lunches, yellow for travel. It was a detailed roadmap of her narcissism. Vance ran his finger down the columns. $400 for hair, he asked. Weekly. I corrected. He turned the page. $2,000 for a retreat. Manifestation. I replied dryly. The total unauthorized spending over 3 years was nearly $20,000. While she contributed 0 income, she had generated massive debt. Vance leaned back, tenting his fingers. In Pennsylvania, debt is usually shared, he noted. But this is dissipation of assets. She spent marital funds on personal enhancement while refusing employment. We can use this. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was Frank. I stepped into the hallway to answer. You holding the line? He asked, his voice rough with smoke. I am at the lawyer's now, I said. We have everything? There was a pause, then a sigh of relief. Don't get soft, Liam. She will cry. She will play the victim. Remember the cabin. I closed my eyes. I remembered the cabin he lost because he felt sorry for his second wife. I remember, Dad, I said. No mercy. I returned to the office, feeling steel in my spine. Vance was on his laptop, looking up Chloe's social media. He turned the screen toward me. It was a post from last night. Chloe holding a martini, surrounded by friends. The caption read freedom isn't free, but it's about to be paid for. Hashtag new chapter hashtag cashing out. She was already spending the settlement. She hadn't won yet. She had promised her friends a payday party. It wasn't just delusion, it was public arrogance. It made my blood run cold. She thinks this is a lottery win, Vance said, closing the laptop. Let's make sure it's an eviction notice. We spent the next hour organizing the files into a weaponized presentation. Tab A, the contract. Tab BC, the separation of funds. Tab C, the debt ledger. We made 3 copies. One for me, one for the judge, and one for Patricia Sterling. It looked like a master's thesis on financial responsibility. It was heavy, dense, and undeniable. It was the physical manifestation of my discipline. I left the office as the streetlights flickered on. The city felt different tonight. Usually, I felt like a cog in the machine, just moving boxes from point A to point B. Tonight, I felt like the architect of my own fate. Chloe was out there somewhere, buying rounds of drinks on a credit card she expected me to pay off. She was celebrating the death of a doormat. She had no idea she was about to walk into a room with a buzzsaw. The elevator ride to the 30th floor felt like an ascent to a scaffold. Patricia Sterling's office was designed to intimidate, all chrome and floor, to ceiling glass overlooking the city. Chloe was already there, sitting with her back to the view, looking like a queen in exile. She wore a new suit, likely charged to the card I was about to contest. She didn't look at me. She just inspected her manicure, projecting an air of absolute boredom. Sterling smiled, revealing teeth that looked expensive and sharp. The air conditioning was set to freezing. Sterling wasted no time with pleasantries. She slid a thick proposal across the polished table. My client is seeking an equitable distribution of the marital estate, she announced, her voice smooth as silk. 50% of the primary residence, 50% of all liquid assets, retirement accounts, and vehicles. She paused for effect. And, given the disparity in income and the sacrifices my client made for the marriage, we are requesting spousal support for 36 months. Chloe finally looked up, smirking. She wanted half my blood. I looked at the numbers. It was a ransom note dressed up in legal jargon. If I agreed, I would be destitute, living in a rental, while she spent my labor. Vance didn't flinch. He put on his reading glasses slowly, dragging out the silence until it became uncomfortable. He read every page, humming occasionally. Sterling tapped her pen, annoyed by the lack of immediate panic. Chloe checked her phone, probably updating her friends that victory was imminent. They had no idea the floor was dropping. Vance finally closed the folder and took off his glasses. This is a very ambitious proposal, he said softly. However, it relies on the assumption that there are marital assets to divide. Sterling's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. Vance reached into his battered briefcase and pulled out the first document. As you know, the parties signed a prenuptial agreement 5 years ago. He slid the blue, inked copy across the glass. Clause 4A. Pre-marital assets remain separate property. The air in the room suddenly felt thinner. Sterling snatched the document, scanning the pages. Vance kept talking, his voice a steady drumbeat of facts. The house deed, he said, dealing another paper. Purchase 2018. Sole owner Liam. The truck title. Purchase 2019. Sole owner Liam. Chloe made a noise of protest. We lived there together, she snapped. I picked out the paint colors. Vance didn't even look at her. Decorating is not ownership, Mrs. Miller. The mortgage was paid exclusively from my client's funds. Her claim to the house evaporated in 10 seconds. What about the savings? Sterling pivoted, trying to regain footing. We know your client has substantial liquidity. Vance smiled, the trap springing shut. Indeed. However, Clause 7b clearly states that income deposited into separate, non-commingled accounts remains separate property. He laid out the bank statements for the accounts she never knew existed. $85,000, Vance noted. All protected, all separate. Chloe's face went pale. The vacation money, the shopping spree funds, the payday she promised her friends, it was all locked behind a wall she couldn't climb. Chloe exploded. You hid money from me? She screamed, standing up. Her chair scraped violently back. I was your wife! You lied to me for years! I looked her in the eye, feeling nothing. I didn't lie. Chloe, I protected myself. You spent every dime of our joint money. I saved the money you couldn't touch. She looked at Sterling, desperate for a lifeline.
Do something! He can't do this!
Sterling held up a hand, silencing her. She was reading the fine print, realizing they were beaten. We aren't done. Vance interrupted, pulling out the spreadsheet. The colors looked bright under the harsh office lights. We need to discuss the marital debt. He slid the forensic audit toward Sterling. Your client spent nearly $20,000 on personal items while contributing zero income. This is dissipation of assets. Sterling stared at the columns of hair appointments and retreats. The realization hit her there was no settlement coming. If they went to court, Chloe wouldn't get a payout. She would leave with a bill for legal fees. Sterling was a predator, but she was also a mathematician. She did the calculation instantly. Her contingency fee was gone. This case was a loser. She leaned over and whispered to Chloe. I saw Chloe's shoulders slump. The fight drained out, replaced by the crushing weight of reality. Vance leaned forward. My client is generous. He lied. He will cover $4,000 of the joint debt to expedite the signing today. The rest is yours. Take it, or we go to court and I sue for legal fees. The silence stretched. Chloe looked at the papers, then at me. There was no love left, only the bitter taste of a gamble lost. She picked up the pen, her hand shaking violently. She signed the agreement, surrendering the house and the savings. She walked out of the glass office carrying nothing but a debt she couldn't pay. I watched the elevator doors close on her face. Vance packed his briefcase and grinned. She walked in looking for a golden parachute and walked out wearing a concrete backpack. The silence in my house used to feel lonely, but now it felt like victory. A year had passed since the settlement, and the air was finally clear of her perfume and her complaints. I spent the first month just reorganizing. I moved the furniture back to where I liked it and reclaimed the closet space. The ghosts of her chaos were scrubbed away with bleach and silence. I sat on my porch, drinking coffee that cost pennies, watching the sun rise over a lawn that belonged entirely to me. It was the sweetest morning I had ever tasted. My workshop became my cathedral again. No more boxes of seasonal DA core blocking the soldering station. I restored radios from the 1940s, the smell of rosin flux, replacing the scent of her anxiety. Chloe had called me a dragon for hoarding gold, but she was wrong. I wasn't guarding a treasure. I was building a fortress. The money in the bank wasn't just numbers on a screen anymore. It was the ability to sleep at night without my chest tightening. Peace was expensive, but I had paid the bill in full. I met Sarah at a swap meet in November. She was arguing with a vendor about the vacuum tubes in a vintage amplifier. She wasn't wearing designer heels. She wore work boots and flannel. I walked over to help, but she didn't need saving. She talked him down $20 and walked away with the prize. We grabbed lunch at a food truck. When the bill came, I reached for my wallet out of habit. Sarah stopped my hand. I got my own, she said, tapping her card. I don't need a sponsor. Dating Sarah was like breathing pure oxygen. There were no hidden tests or passive-aggressive hints about trips to Miami. She had her own woodshop where she restored mid-century furniture. We spent weekends working side by side, the hum of her sander harmonizing with my soldering iron. It was a partnership, not a hostage situation. One evening, she looked at my organized tool wall and nodded in approval. Systematic, she said, smiling. I like a man who knows where his screwdriver belongs. It was the highest compliment she could give. The ghost tried to return on a Tuesday night. My phone buzzed on the workbench, displaying a number I had deleted but recognized instantly. It was a long text from Chloe about closure and mistakes. She said she was struggling and missed the stability I provided. The irony was sharp. She didn't miss me, she missed the ATM. I didn't feel anger or vindication. I just felt bored. I deleted the message without finishing it. The past was a sunk cost, and I wasn't investing another second in it. Sarah looked up from her lathe, dusting sawdust from her safety goggles. Who was that? She asked casually. Spam, I replied, putting the phone face down. Just someone trying to sell me something I don't need. She laughed and went back to work. Later, she mentioned wanting a prenup to protect her grandmother's inheritance if we got serious. I smiled, picking up my soldering iron. I told my lawyer to take everything